Welcome back to Unsolved Mysteries of the Reservation, everybody. We are back for another episode. We're going to start off this episode with some listener stories. I don't know. They're about spirits, I guess.
Yeah. So I had commented on Stinjotti's Facebook page one day, and I said, hey, you got a story. And, I didn't think he's going to get back, but he got back. I was like, all right, I'm going to hit the DMs and see what happens. So basically I just asked him, what's a spooky story you have, and, maybe something, you got, a story we can tell. And, he goes on, he starts to tell me there's a story, or I guess a house that he used to live in with his family. And, it was a time when his daughter was real young, and his family was real young, and basically what was going on was that she was talking to someone or something in the house, and he started asking questions, and he's like, what's who are you talking to, and I told the story prior about a house that had that similar type of thing, and he goes on to to tell me that. Basically the house that they lived in, the daughter was talking to these two entities, and at all times in the night, they were messing with his daughter, his family member, and basically when that family member did not want to play with these things at like 3 a.m, the family member would say, hey, there's another two that are coming in. After, like, she said no, another two spirits would come in the in the room and be mean to her, call her names, and and basically not torment her, but just basically do say things about her and pinch her and pull her hair and just mess with her. So then I kind of asked him kind of what what do you think that is? He didn't really respond, but he just basically told me that once they, he did some things, smudge, and he kind of went away. But his daughter's older now, and he basically just said that it kind of led him off in another direction in his life. When it came to taking care of himself. When it comes to these spirits. But I appreciate Stinjotti getting back to us. And telling us that story, about those spirits, because I think, it's prevalent when, we talked about in what was it, 2 episodes ago about, you don't know kind of what you're getting into until you get into it, so I shout out to Stinjotti, man. I listen to his stuff every day, I appreciate him, giving us that story, that's pretty cool, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Shout out to Stinjotti. Thank you for the story. And any thoughts, Chris? Tyler?
No, that just kind of reminded me of this real scary story about my cousin. When he was little, like little, like 2, like little. He always said that he had a pet monkey, and he would like talk to this monkey and like play with it, and like it was kind of like an imaginary friend. And he would talk to that monkey, and like I said, he did this for probably about almost a year. And then my aunt said one day he was in the back seat, and he said he just started crying. My cousin was crying, and she said, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "My monkey jumped on that man's motorcycle." And she said after that day, he never talked about that monkey again.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like she said, like he would have conversations with it, like, you know, it was like a little imaginary friend and play. And then when he cried, and she said, after that day, and he cried and never talked about it again. So whatever it was that left him is jumped on that man's motorcycle.
Yeah. Man, so it sounded like it jumped from. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's what he said.
You know, they've always said, you know, especially with children, you know, their minds are open, their imagination is open, and they're able to see those things, you know. And I'm always curious when I hear people talking about their children have imaginary friends and how interactive they are. And just like in that story, you know, that imaginary friend someday just leaves, you know, and goes. And, you know, for old Indians, you know, they used to have I guess what you would say, a medicine for these children, you know, to kind of wash off when they see these things, you know. And if they continued to see them, they would teach them things too, you know, about sight, I guess what you might say, and being able to see things and you know, learn certain things, you know. And that I always thought was cool was when, you know, you heard tribes talking about twins, you know, and twins or triplets, one of them usually has that ability stronger than everyone else. Now, you know, I said this before, you know, they say everybody has that ability, but when we become adults, we kind of cut it off our thoughts, you know, and but everybody has that ability to reopen those kind of sites. And, you know, everybody's been in a place where the hairs stand up on the back of their neck. You know, everybody's experienced that. Or you go into a room and, you know, people aren't getting along. You know, you could just cut it with a knife. You know, that's all in the same ballpark. You know, so I believe these kind of stories, especially when it comes from children. You know, a lot of these entities and beings, you know, they visit children. Some are good and some are bad. So, you know, I hope, you know, that's a little bit education on those things for youth. You know, they old timers, you know, they used to really watch their children, even when they would go outside and play, whether you were being watched or not. I can recall, you know, of course, everybody's been told, you know, come in, you know, when the sun goes down. When those street lights come on, you better be in that room. You
Exactly.
know?
Yep.
You know, and it's because of those kind of things. They knew those things, you know, roamed around, and some of them they would take off with children, you know, and you would never be seen again, or you'd come back and, you know, maybe your mind would be blown. You know,
Those are the stories I've always heard about, like LPs and children. A lot of times they will reveal themselves to children a lot of times and play with them. But then, like you said, too, lead them off, get them lost, you know, take their things, mess with their mind, you know. So there's always been a correlation with LPs and kids, too, you know. So those are some stories I heard. I just remember, like, my grandma always telling us, like, don't jump in puddles, you know, because the LPs, they'll get you. Like, they live down there in those puddles. And it probably was just to keep us from jumping in rain puddles, you know, but I'll tell you what, I believed it.
They used to also tell, you know, like you go to these old dances or churches, you know, they would tell those guys, you know, be careful where you throw your water out, you know, because you might throw it out on them. You know, and really make them mad. You don't want to make them mad, or, you know, you're taking out trash, you know, make sure you put it where it belongs, you know, because you might be terrorizing their home. And, you know, they're going to get mad. So, you know, I know some people that don't believe, they'll say, oh, those are just stories to scare kids. But, you know, I have to say, you know, I've been around for 21 years. No. But, I've seen many things in those 21 years, and you know, those, you know, I know definitely exist. You know, I've even shared pictures of their homes,
Yeah.
you know, and things like that, you know, and so with that being said, you know, I definitely believe, you know, into those things, you know, and you know, also spirits going visiting children. You know,
Yeah.
you'll hear stories, especially now, you know, with that Facebook and I'm sorry, my mind's going crazy, but I can't hardly think. What was that other one called?
Oh, Instagram, TikTok.
Yeah,
all
Instagram, TikTok, you know, and anyway, you know, you see all those videos of, you know, the babies being slid around, or
Yeah.
they'll be picked up in that crib, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
you know those spirits, they just love babies, you know, those new beings, they call them, you know, and you know, spirits will want them, you know, want what they've got. They've got new life. They we call it
Life force.
Innocence, maybe.
yeah, their essence is so
Yeah.
strong, you know, those
Yeah.
spirits, they just love it. And so they always say, you know, when you have children, there's certain ways that you doctor their rooms, you know, in a way to keep those kind of things away from them,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, also when they go outside and play. But you know, a lot of people, they don't talk about those things anymore. And so anyway, that's about all I want to say on that.
Yeah, you know, like I said, just going back to, you know, Stanjati's story, you know, it's, you know, that's stories like that are, like I said, I've mentioned before with, you know, on a prior episode, that those types of stories are the ones that really spook me out. And you know, I get you know, I think about my daughter, you know, going through some of the stuff that I went through as a kid, you know, and seeing the, you know, guy on the roof, or, you know, seeing shadows, you know, that there's nothing there, but there's something there. So, you know, I relate to those stories in that way, you know, and there's plenty of stories out there. You know, if you got a story like that, let us know. You know, those are interesting to me. But kind of moving on from that, you know, I know, you know, we talk about things on this podcast that, you know, that can be, you know, I won't say dangerous, but I guess that would be the word. Things that, you know, that are, like I said, I don't want to say dangerous, but, you know, they're things that
Taboo.
not.
Touchy.
Yes, touchy's the word. Sensitive, a topic, and I think us having these conversations and letting the younger crowd know, you know, because if I hadn't asked questions, I wouldn't know some of the things that I know. And with that being said, you know, Chris has something that kind of been on his heart. You know, he kind of been wanting to talk about last, you know, episodes that we, you know, we're going to get to today. And, you know, Chris, we'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, before I go into that, though, I just want to make sure, you know, you guys don't have any other listener stories or whatever. I know it's not a listener story, but I got called from, Russell, you'll have to help me with the name.
Adrian. I think it's Adrian. Yeah.
Adrian Eckelhop from Pawnee, Oklahoma. I'm naming her like that, boy. She lives on 3rd Street. No, I'm just kidding. No, she called me up the other night. It was probably about like last week or so. Her and her friend, they went to Pawnee on the reserve. They have a new playground out there that was just built. And they were out there kind of towards evening time. Her and her friend, they both had their kids out there, and they was over there, you know, just running around. And anyway, they said they saw this merry-go-round. It started spinning, and it started picking up speed. And said her and her friend, you know, looked at that merry-go-round, you know, and they was just kind of shocked because it was picking up speed. Then suddenly it stopped, and then it started going the other way. And her friend, I forget what her friend name was. I want to say it's Laura or Lori or something like that. She said, well, it's got to be the wind. You know, it's probably the wind. and then they both looked at the swings, and they weren't even moving. And so they sat there for just a little bit longer, and then they said it stopped moving, and the furthest swing from them started to swing back and forth, and it started getting higher and higher, and they both noticed that none of those other swings are moving. So they got their kids and they left. And I thought that was pretty cool. So, she wanted to share that.
Was it in the middle of the day?
No, it was towards the evening time. So anyway, I guess it got, it was when it was kind of dark, but not dark, and stuff. So anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. She was calling, what do I do? What do I do? I said, get out of there. I said, go, girl, go.
Get your kids, get out of there.
I was like, I would have called nobody. I just jumped in my car and gone. I wouldn't even got those kids. No, I'm just kidding.
Just left them. I know.
You
I didn't mean
belong to the playground now.
I didn't mean to. Russell, did you have another story? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but I've seen videos of on TikTok where I don't know, just be some person filming and they're like, check this out, and one like swing will be swinging, and the rest will just be still, like they won't be moving at all, no wind. Or he's like, and then the person's like, no, there's no wind, there's no nothing, but yet the swing's just swinging away as if somebody's in it. And so I've seen a few videos of those on TikTok where there's some in the daytime, there's a few at night, but I mean it's just out in the middle, nobody's around, it's just that person filming. And then, of course, it's like, where's the string? Oh, he probably just went over there and pushed it and then started filming. But he's like, no. And so, I don't know, though. But, I mean, playground stuff, I mean.
I'll have to say this, like I said, over my 21 years, I said, no. But I've actually been to several haunted, playgrounds. Some are brand new, some are super old. And I even posted a picture on one on my Instagram that's famous for having children's spirits. And I think that, way back then, you had a lot of children pass away from different diseases and different things that happened in the communities. And to me, it only makes sense that, that they would find the playground to be a place of, where they want to dwell, because they get to play all the time. And so, but then again, me being me, sometimes I know sometimes they may not be children. But, if they give me a good solid story, like a school burnt down, or maybe they had a pandemic in that area that a lot of children, passed away, to me, then it makes sense, and some of these places that I've been to, we've been able to catch, voices, of those little children laughing, and even communicated with a few, and they're sad, and I know, out of respect for the parents, if they're still alive, I definitely don't want to upset anybody, so, but I will say, these playgrounds, they're real, they're real places, and, to me it makes sense, that their spirits, just like, we talked about harmony, that was the reason we went to that area, but I'm not going to say the area or what happened there, because I know, that community's still strong, and a lot of the people that have lost people are still around, so out of respect for those families, I won't mention them, but, again, we've gone to one, so to me, hearing that, and especially in Pawnee, especially in the area where this playground is at, it's the old reserve. They used to have a lot of things on that reserve. That's where they came when they came from Nebraska. And, not too far from that little playground. Russell, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you have that Grayview, you know, not too far, not even a block
Yeah.
from that playground, that new playground. So, you know, I definitely, you know, believe that, and plus I heard the fear in her voice when she called. So, you know, I knew this was real. This was a real deal, you know, and fortunately there was nothing I could do, you know, to help her or those kids other than say run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get out of there.
You know, get home and smoke off, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only thing I could say or do at that time. So
Yeah. I mean, this will be out after that, but it's right by where we're going to be at. It's right by where we were at the event, though. At the roundhouse. That playground.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They got that new buildings over there come by IHS.
Mm-hmm. Like the police station.
I don't know.
Firehouse.
I don't know what it is. I just know they got new buildings over there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It was a great time at Pawnee.
That was the best.
Yeah. It was a good time.
Man, wow.
We'll talk
Shocking
more about
stories,
it on the next episode.
Crazy.
We're trying to be in the future right now.
Yeah, I didn't mean to make a segue back on because I'm so curious on, you know, the kind of what we're going to talk about today. But I know you had another story, Russell, for listeners.
Man, I got them old eyes. Josh DeLate? Layett?
Yeah, I don't want to butcher your name. I think it's Josh Delayett.
Josh
DeLate.
DeLayett?
just say Josh. Well,
Josh. We'll just say Josh.
Dang, got her giving social security numbers too.
He
No.
wants the credit.
Yeah. Oh, he wants credit.
Yeah.
All right, well,
That's why I was
And what's
careful what you ask for, Josh.
Yeah, I know.
DeLayett.
Josh Day.
Josh DeLayett.
But he said, I had a story I wanted to relay to y'all. I was back visiting family in Canada in 2002. Very rural, I would say. I was driving my granny's car back on them dirt roads. No seatbelt, just cruising. They had a radio station there that played traditional music. I was listening to that because it was different to me. Anyway, I was speeding too fast and rolled the car off the side of the road into the swamp. No seatbelt. I didn't move an inch as the car rolled. I stayed right in the seat. When I landed in the swamp, the music was still playing. I rolled down the window and crawled out because the car was sinking. I got out and someone was right there to pick me up. Didn't even have a scratch. Someone was definitely there helping me. And then he said, oh wait, hold on. And then this is recently. He said, I got finished watching the videos Chris posted on YouTube about 11 o'clock. I was going to go to sleep and then something started scratching on my back door of my trailer. I have 4 hog dogs who was asleep inside, and when the scratching started, they didn't make a peep. If they smelled a coon or a bear, they would have lost their minds, but when they heard it, they didn't leave their beds. Oh, and he said, I also didn't go outside. I just yelled, nobody's home.
That's the best way.
that's what I would have done.
Exactly.
You handled that the right way.
That's a good story, Josh. That's a good story, Josh.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
Man, the
Yeah, bro.
scratching.
I was telling him I knew somebody that had gotten a wreck before, and they had like a handprint on him or something like that from saving him or something. But he was saying that somebody pulled him out of his car, helped him, and nobody was there.
Man.
I don't know if y'all might be too young like me. I don't know, but
You heard this from your grandfather, didn't you?
yeah, my great grandfather, he told me like that. No, this was maybe 20, 30 years ago. I was told that Oklahoma City News Channel had did a story on this wrecking service, and they had just brought a car in that someone passed away in a wreck, and they had it on camera, the spirit coming out of that car, walking around it, like they didn't know what was going on. And I think you can still Google that, because I seen that one probably about 6 or 7 years ago. Somebody showed it to me, and
Wow.
I pulled it up, and sure enough, and that was on the Oklahoma City news. That they thought that was just that moving, to show that, and to me that was kind of like, well, actually that was way before any of these paranormal shows even showed up. So I don't know if you guys can Google it or what, but
Was it like? I guess was it like someone coming out of the car and they were just looking, like they were just like looking at like, wow, man, this is crazy. I survived this, but like they were gone. Maybe you think it kind of what it was.
I think they was probably trying to figure out what happened to them, because sometimes death happens so quick. They say you don't know you're gone. So
Yeah.
I don't know who has a phone that might be able to look it up.
And I've also heard some stories like that, and I saw one.
Did you find it, Russell?
Oh, sorry.
I think so. I'll probably have the volume down. I'll pass it around though.
No, that's definitely. Well, I guess this is maybe an edit here, but
Whoa.
that might be interesting to put it on TikTok, like with the story.
Whoa, check that out.
I've never seen that though.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Man, that gave me the
And that
heebie-jeebies.
is way before all those ghost shows.
Dang, check that out. That's cool.
Golly, it's a VHS. What?
So if you go to YouTube,
Hey, there's someone's
I
auntie
think
too
type
pointing out
in
to it.
type in Oklahoma Wrecker Ghost.
Wow.
I think it's called. Type that in on YouTube and you
That sure did make like a circle.
Man.
you would be
around
able
that
to
thing.
watch the video. Oklahoma Wrecker Ghost.
Maybe
Wow.
maybe you could post it on something on one
Probably
of
post
those.
it on Instagram.
Yeah, because to me that was pretty cool. I mean, when I seen that, I mean, when I first saw it, I thought, wow, that blew my mind. But
Yeah.
like I said, that was way before you had was it Unsolved Mysteries or anything like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a video a couple weeks or so ago on Reddit. I think it was overseas though. Don't quote me on this, but like it's like a closed or circuit TV, like a security type camera, and it's like pointing down towards this street, and there's this guy he's just like barely in the frame, like on the lower like right or left hand side, and I can't tell like if he's at a bar or something, like I don't know, but he's just standing still. And then there's this truck that comes around the corner, and as soon as that truck comes around the corner, this guy comes out of literally like nowhere, and he touches him on the back. And that guy turns and looks like this, and then this truck's pulling around, and when that truck turns, this big like gate swings out from the back of that truck, and I mean it misses him by like, it's incredible like how close it came to him. And then the guy just like walked off. And then they talked to the guy, and he said when that hand touched him, and you could see it, he said, behind you. And that's what made him look. But then the guy like disappeared too. It's weird. It's the weirdest thing. Yeah.
That was on Reddit?
It was on Reddit, yeah.
I think is it like the guy's walking out from like the street?
Yeah, he just,
I think
like,
I may have seen that
appears
before.
out of like nowhere, and like nobody knows like where that guy went. Like he's not on any other videos or anything else.
Like no CCTV, I guess. Is it from a CCTV?
It's from a CCTV. Yeah.
Man, that's crazy.
Dang, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know who's watching out for you, man.
Yeah.
I told a story in Hominy, which eventually we're going to post that story. I've never told that story in public, but I had someone tell me that I wasn't supposed to go that day. I was supposed, I got things to do. That's kind of what they was told. But man, you just never know who's watching out for you, man.
Yeah.
You just never do.
And I've also heard stories like that of like, people like coming in contact with somebody that says something like, like watch out, or like will help them, and then just like disappear. You know what I mean? Like it's just it's just weird.
Did you guys have any more listener stories?
I got one more, but I don't know if they want me to read it on here. I'll have to wait for confirmation. But that was it for me.
Yeah.
What about you?
I had a couple people just reach out to me and just tell me how much they enjoy listening to us.
Yeah, I've had a lot
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah, and then the coolest ones for me though are the people that like, man, I grew up in Oklahoma, and it reminds me of Oklahoma. You know what I mean? Like sitting around just talking and telling stories. So those are the emails I've gotten. Just like I said, just people like, man, I love what y'all do. Like it's so fun. It makes me miss Oklahoma. And,
Yeah.
you know, so I don't know how you'd miss Oklahoma, but nah,
Man, it's hotter than sin out here too.
I'm just kidding. Nah. Everybody always like, why don't you like go to Texas to teach? And I'm like, I don't want to go to Texas. I don't want to go to Arkansas, man. This is where my home is. Like,
Oh.
grounds aren't Texas. The grounds aren't
Yeah.
Arkansas. You know,
Yeah.
they're here. This is my home. This is my people.
Yeah.
You know, I have no aspirations to ever leave Oklahoma. You know, so I don't know. That's just me though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had a lot of messages
Yeah.
too. Just shout out to the listeners. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Appreciate
Yeah.
y'all for sure.
We sure appreciate all those messages and especially all those good words. You know, it's tough doing stuff like this. I know these guys over here, they work hard. You know, to share just what little we can, and you know, I know sometimes, you know, it'd be appreciative, you know, to hear some good words. So you
Yeah.
know, I'm proud of each and every one of these young guys coming and doing this. You know, that's a great thing that they're doing. You know, this stuff needs to be told, you know, because nobody else out there is telling these kind of things, you know, and as you know, these tribes we're all losing our ways, you know, and we're losing so much so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
COVID took, man, a whole bunch quickly.
Yeah.
And, you know, with what we've got now, you know, we don't do something about it, it's going to be lost forever, you know,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm proud of these young guys, seeing that need, take care of that need, you know, and at this time, you know, I had mentioned to these young guys that there was something I was wanting to kind of visit about, you know, because I've been getting actually some phone calls about this, and, you know, people asking me, you know, and sending me messages, and I told them, I said, well, you know, this is more than just a text I can do, you know, text, man, my thumbs will be all broke
burned
off,
up, man.
broke off by the time I finish
Calloused up.
messaging and all that stuff. So, you know, I told him, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll ask him if I can just have just a little time to express this. You know, the topic I was wanting to kind of talk is about spontaneous human combustion. You know, I've been getting a lot of phone calls on this. And I'll say, leave those burritos alone, guys. No, I'm just teasing. But, no,
Blowing up the back of the toilets, man.
gosh, they went in there and got burnt up. No, I'm just kidding. But for some of you guys that don't know this, you know, what that spontaneous human combustion is it's basically where your body catches on fire for no reason. You know, they say, you know, the medical people, you know, they like to believe it's a chemical imbalance in the body. But, you know, to me, you know, if you look at the statistics on this, you know, they say it always starts from the trunk of the body. And they say, you know, it has to get super hot. You know, these companies that do cremation, you know, they say sometimes, well, most of the time, they'll burn a body up. Takes over 8 to 12 hours to burn a body up, but the bones are still there. And they have to take those bones and put it into this machine that turns it into dust. And they mix it up, and then they give it to the family or whomever, you know. But in this spontaneous human combustion, you know, you burn up within 30 minutes, you know, bone and all. You know, so just understand that right there. And also understand that if you're sitting in a chair when this happens, everything is around you is okay except for you. You get burnt up. You know, chair's pretty much toast, but everything else, you could have flammable things near your chair, and it doesn't even bother it. They also say, 95% of these cases, these people are alone. They're either sitting in a chair or they're laying in bed, or they're just doing everyday things and they just burn up. And you can see a lot of pictures of this. I don't know if one of you guys can pull up a picture so you guys can look what a body looks like when it happens. They always say just the feet, or the legs, or certain part of the body still there, so they know it's a human being. But they say all these fire departments are trying to figure out what causes this, why is this so. And again, don't ask me to spell it because I'm bad at spelling, so you're on your own on that one. But if you can, Google and look at those pictures, and this is a real thing. This is something that you will hear and you will see about, all over the world. And
Yeah, pass that around.
yeah, and we're passing a picture of it right now. And anyway, this is a real deal. But all over the country, people have different beliefs of what takes place. I've heard stories. Of course, the old one is, they're doing something that they aren't supposed to, or they made a pact with a being, and it came to collect. You hear stories like that too.
It's crazy.
And
That is crazy.
the thing that people don't understand, this is an old thing. Even the Old Testament speaks about this. Some of those prophets getting burnt up. They made a pact with God that they reneged on, or they didn't fulfill. And of course this took place. And then you have some, even older, older cultures around the world. They believe that certain deities came and collect, or they made this certain deity upset, and it punished them. And Indian folks, they had, stories about this too. Long time ago, they always said, some of these medicines are so strong. Some of these songs that they sing, there was a way of life. I've said that before, and I'll say it again. There was a way of life, with this. And if you didn't adhere to it, even if you wavered just a hair, things like that would take care of you. It would eat you or burn you. Basically, when they say eat you, that's what they mean. And so I'm glad that today, especially our Indian folks, a lot of them, they've put this stuff away. There's some tribes that still kind of have some of this stuff, but dang, just think if we still had that kind of stuff, man, everybody be burning up left and right, because we don't live right. We don't help one another. We don't do what we're supposed to. We're too busy sounding good, instead of doing the right thing, I think about that, when they were asking me, what is your opinion on this? And, of course I said, well, give me some time, think about this. This is a tough topic, because, with Indian folks, especially with the Muskogee Creeks, we consider this one of the oldest entity, and it does have a name. And even, what kind of scares me about this is just even talking about it. So, word of warning to our listeners out there that this is something that's serious. If you go and do research and whatever, and you do by some chance, get this, don't play around with it, or that's what's going to happen to you. That ultimate power also has an ultimate price. And a lot of us I know today, myself included, can't control those things. And that's just kind of one story of for the Creek people, that we have certain things that we can utilize like that, but sometimes it's not the best, but sometimes our anger gets the best of us, and it causes us, I said this before, you do evil, evil's gonna come back on you, and it always does. And so I'm not saying every case is like that, but if you listen to these other stories around the world of, just like the Egyptian people, they have a deity. They say, even going by that deity, and when I'm talking about deity, I'm talking about, I don't know if you guys can help me explain that.
Like a statue?
Yeah, like a statue of those. And you just think something about something around that statue. You're stepping into its realm, and eventually it's going to come and get you, whether you're knowingly or unknowingly. And that's what I think happens maybe to some of these people. Of course, you always hear that they do the report on these individuals, and they say, oh, he was a heavy drinker and a smoker, and so he probably dropped ash on himself, and he had so much alcohol in him, it just cause and effect, but dang, to burn your bones to ash, it's not as simple as that. Or they'll say, she was, messing around, by a boiler, maybe she fell on top of it, and it burnt her up. But again, you have to think how hot you have to be to get burnt up like that, to ash, bone and everything. And as you guys saw in those pictures, this is a real thing, so I'm not saying all these guys were messing with something that they shouldn't have been, but maybe they went across came across something that was there that was like that, because a lot of these people that you'll hear about, they're all non-native, so that speaks volumes right there. So only a few native incidents today you will hear, but long time ago, when they had that power and that kind of knowledge, did those things happen. And every tribe out there has these stories. Maybe they don't have it now, maybe they forgot, maybe that's why we're acting up in these spiritual realms, not doing things that we should be doing. And so, I thought that was very interesting that, people are asking about that now, and I'm trying to figure out why, because again, this is something that isn't, it's all over the world, but my understanding, you're starting to have more cases like that. And, they're wanting to know why this is. And, again, I don't really have no answer other than, for what I know, and which isn't much. I don't know a lot, but all I do know about this is that this is real. And what was told to me was that, some of these things that you can mess with will get you like that. And so, with that being said, I don't know, if you guys have heard stories. I'd be interested to hear if any of you guys have heard stories like that. But I know in Muskogee Creek country, there were stories like that long time ago. And when I say long time ago, I'm not talking about 1900s. I'm talking about 1800s. Our tribe is good about handing down those kind of stories. And, back in Alabama and Georgia, Florida, off in those areas, there were stories that were handed down during those times to us about these certain entities and certain medicines that you can carry.
No, yeah, this is the story that I heard. This has happened I'd say probably 10 years ago. I heard this story, and I only heard it one time. And, kind of just to, preface what Chris was saying, a lot of these stories are told one time. And it may be in passing. Well, the story that I had heard about this being entity, I guess. Now, this was, like I said, it's not something to play around about, so I'm going to I'll try to explain this as best as I can. But this being is in fire, is what I was told. The story goes, I'm not going to give any background to this person. I'm just going to tell a story. So this person, was out with a bunch of people that she shouldn't have been out with. They weren't living right. Like I said, I'm kind of nervous to even tell this, but they weren't living right. And she was hanging out with them and doing things, and they were, they had made this really big fire. It was almost like a bonfire, I guess you could say. And the entity and the being that Chris is talking about, or beings, it could be multiple, comes from fire. It travels through fire. And she was looking at the fire and looking through it, from like looking at the person on the other side of the fire, and she noticed the face in that fire. And she looked at it, and she kept looking at it, and it had a look kind of almost Indian, but it looked like devilish. Like, didn't look right in the fire, and it stayed there. And she was like, what is that? I wonder what that is. Thinking, like, looking, and, you hear, that's I hear that story, and this being, or entity, it's old, it's ancient. And she said that, she told the story one time. She said that basically what happened was that she saw this being, and she took a picture of it. I don't know where that picture is. I've seen the picture, but you can see a face, and it don't look like anything that I've ever seen. I may try to see if I can ask around about it, but what Chris is talking about is this thing was maybe talked about or mentioned in this group of people, and it traveled. It came up through that fire. Now I don't know. She basically cut the story off there after she took the picture, and basically stopped hanging out with those people, and she told her people about it, and they said, yeah, you need to. It's probably time to get away from those people because they're not doing something right. But this thing, this being, from what I was told, was it travels. It kind of shows up in fire, like open fire.
Yeah, that's correct. The Six Nations, which is the Mohawk people, the Seneca, Cayuga, Oneida, Onondaga, and Tuscarora nations, they had a story of this being too. Then they have a name for it, or they used to have a name for it. and it was translated as Man in the Fire. And it's they say when you look at that fire, it moves around like a human being. You know, it can hear you. It can travel if it wants. It can be small as an ember and big as a forest fire. And it can travel. You know, it can go all over the place. If it wants to get you, it will get you. And I always think about that when I seen this old movie. Well, it ain't that old, I don't know. But they call it Backdraft. Mm-hmm. I can't remember who was in it, but anyway, you know, they would say that fire's talking, you know, and you see that scene where it moves up the wall and it's doing all kinds of things, and it's like a being. Mm-hmm. And when I heard those Six Nations stories about that man in the fire, you know, I thought about that, you know, at that time. I said, dang, they must have talked to those guys. Mm-hmm. But, you know, even the Potawatomi people, you know, there's several bands of the Potawatomis. They had stories of fire like that. And if you didn't do things right, it would devour you. It would eat you like a monster. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, there's many tribes out there that have stories of this man in the fire. You know, even the Creeks, you know, we talk to the fire, you know, and when we're out there dancing and really getting that spirit, we talk to them. But, you know, again, you know, there's always good and there's always bad. So, you know, how some of these tribes perceive this fire, you know, is different. And, you know, but the basic or the general thing of this fire or this entity has a lot of power. And, you know, when it wants you, it'll take you. And just like those pictures you seen, you know, to me that'd be a horrible way to go.
Yeah, I remember. I think there's like a write-up on that woman. It's a lady in those pictures I was looking at. But I think that's the one I seen on, I don't know if you guys ever seen a show. It's called Beyond Bizarre. You guys ever seen that?
No.
Old school show. Just about paranormal stuff, cryptids, just a lot of stuff happening in a world that was like really just interesting to me, but same time creepy. But I remember, I think it was that or Sightings. It was one of these shows. Sightings was on Sci-Fi. Same thing, cryptids and paranormal stuff. But one of them talked about what we're talking about now. But I was such a little kid that I just didn't understand it. Like, I didn't know, like I just thought, like, humans were able to do that. Like, they could just go up in flames at any time. You know, and I'm a kid, so I don't get it. Like, I don't understand, like, what it is they're talking about. I just see the image I see, which is a woman that they're telling a story about, and she's, you know, she's gone with everything just ashed up. And you brought up that nothing else burns. Yep. That's how it was in that pictures they were showing on that show. Everything was just untouched, and it was just like where she was sitting at was like just burnt up. Not even a chair was burnt up. It was just like her. Yep. Everything else was intact.
Yep.
And so it was just, I didn't understand it. So it freaked me out. It scared me a lot because, you know, I didn't want that to happen to me, but I didn't get like what it was. So I think I asked my grandma what that was, and we watched it. And then she didn't really talk about it. She didn't really say anything about it. She just said like, oh, you know, don't worry about it. You know, don't think about it. Just, I guess, kind of move on, you know, like it's trying not to probably freak me out, but I'm assuming she knew some stuff too about it. But I heard that, and then I just did what she told me to do, and I just never really thought about it again because she said everything's going to be okay. You know, that won't happen to you. And so, and then when you brought that up, like, it just gave me that memory because I haven't heard of that in a long time, since that time when I was a little kid. Like, I've never thought about it or heard about it Or like I just remember those pictures I just got through looking at. That was the only thing I seen about it. But now there's like a video of somebody doing that. It's like, is this the actual like, what's the word? Evidence of somebody doing this. And I didn't watch the video, but because it sent me to another site. I don't know if it's a safe site, so I don't want to put myself at risk.
Can't trust them. Can't
Yeah,
trust them.
Joined in the dark side of the
Yeah, I
net.
know. I don't want to. Yeah, so
Dark
I mean,
web.
but I mean, the picture is like a guy on a couch, and obviously, yeah, he's on fire. But that's it. That's all it shows, and it just says, "Is this clear evidence of this happening?" And it's like a newer video, like it's new, like it's not old school recordings, like back in the day. It's like a new video, and so it's crazy that this is being brought up. It's good information because I had no idea about any of it. And I didn't even know like it was a entity, I guess. But it makes sense because fire is old.
Yeah.
Way back, goes way back. I think GSP and Joe Rogan were talking about how there was some sort of cavalry that manipulated fire to where it never went out, and they don't know how they did it. They don't know how they did that. They thought they used petroleum oil, but no, and it was a fire that never ever went out. They only knew how to put it out themselves. I forgot who, but they're talking about aliens and stuff, and they started talking about this fire. I'll have to find it on YouTube, but yeah.
The thing that I think is kind of scary too, again, I said, many cultures, kind of believed in that fire, as an entity. It wasn't just an Indian thing. Back in, I have a bad thing of pronunciating words sometimes, but they call it Mesopotamian era. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Is that how you pronounce it? Mm-hmm. And, back then, those guys had witches, as you might say, that used to witch individuals. And it would cause that person that they were witching to burn up like that. And those were cases back then. And I don't know where those people are from. Isn't that like around Greece or something?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
And then you go back to what they call old Europe. And they practiced that kind of witchcraft too. And, like I was telling you guys before, back then, those guys were like Indian folks too. They had good and they had evil, and they would call upon this being to witch somebody to cause that to happen. Mm-hmm. But again, it took a high price for that to be done. Now I hear there's I don't know what you call it, a spell book that these new age, I don't know what you call it. I don't want to call them devil worshippers, but they call them something else. They're kind of like the new age warlocks.
Wiccan?
No, those guys are supposed to be good, the Wiccans,
okay.
But these ones are different. I guess they're the evil guys, and I can't remember. Apologize, can't remember the name of it. But some of those guys are starting to practice those kind of things. Maybe that might be the reason of the uptick, But, I hope, somebody's telling them, yeah, you might cause that somebody to get burnt up, but eventually it's going to come for you. Mm-hmm. Because you can't control these things. I don't care who you are, what you think you know. These things are masters of trickery. Mm-hmm. And they'll make you think you're in charge till it's too late. These things only want to take lives. And that includes yours too. So, I think that's kind of, to me, that's probably the scariest thing, because you got all these new age guys, they just think it's for fun. Mm-hmm. And, to me, it's something serious, and I don't know how many tribes still practice this too. I'm sure there is. But again, I that blows my mind. Just what research I've done on this topic since I got that call. To give a response. So to me, there's other stories around the world, that they would give sacrifices to this thing to take somebody or to cause havoc, and eventually it'd come back and get them. And so, I have a belief that, I was always told that, if you bring this to life and it come and get you, then it's going to roam free. And I'm sure there's a lot of those things roaming free, and it takes, you to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And, you might have nothing to do with, doing evil or whatever, but these things don't care. They're going to get you. And to me right now, in this time of day, everybody's trying to be a warlock. Everybody's trying to be a wizard. Everybody's trying to do this and trying to do that, but they don't understand the repercussions of these things. And, to me, it's like, if you're going to mess with it, then go full force with it. Don't do something and then cry around later and say, oh, get this off of me. When it's coming for you, don't be that way. You put it on somebody, then you accept your punishment. But again, I'm not a holy man, and that's the beauty of our Creator. He'll forgive you and he'll take care of you if you ask. Even though he forgives you, you're still gonna have to pay a price because you did evil. And just like anything else, you have to do your own sentence. And that's not just that church way, but that's that ceremonial way. And that's what people forget. They forget that this ceremonial way, there is no forgiveness. You can go to church and ask for forgiveness, and that white man God will forgive you. The Indian God, he's Indian. No. But he's going to make you pay. So you guys out there listening, y'all think y'all's playing with this stuff. You're going to get away with it. Sooner or later, it's coming for you.
Yeah, Tyler. No, I'm just kidding. No.
After that last episode.
Yeah, man.
No, I'm just kidding.
All those nasty things you were saying.
Something got a hold of me.
No, you're 100% on that, Chris. That's why I get so nervous, especially talking about that, the fire. I've seen enough things in my life, and I'm only 28 years old. I haven't lived a life like you've lived, and it's real. It's real interesting to me to see these people doing these things, and maybe I'll have to tell a story about someone that I had a story that happened to me about these new age type of. I guess I'll tell it now since we're here. We're here, aren't we? I used to know someone who did this. Well, used to. I haven't talked to them in a while, but they would send me videos and pictures of them levitating things. I always wonder if it's something we can't see lifting that up. Like in the room, full body person, you just can't see him lifting it up. And with seeing those things, I'm going to skip a few of the details of this full story because it's forever long, and it involves some things that are not to be shared, I guess, really, because it involves, it's here and it happened here in Tulsa. But I got an introduction to that stuff. I didn't practice. I just saw it, and I, was engaged in because I was curious about it. I mean, not that I was going to practice, but just just to see if if that thing is real, if these things are real, especially when it comes to the new age type of stuff. Well, I started watching the videos and asking questions and gaining knowledge about it and just being curious. And this old house I used to live in it was on Harvard over there by TU. I had things going on in my house. And like I said, I don't think I've ever told this story but one time publicly. I guess for good reason. But at night, my dogs would not go in the living room. I have 2 dogs, 70-pound plus dogs, big dogs. They would not go in the living room at night after I had gained some of the, known about these things that's going on. And I'd always hear like scampering across the floor at night. And I'd always get up and look, and there's nothing there. I thought it was rats. I really thought it was. I had called an exterminator out, and I was really trying to figure out what was going on because no one wants rats. It's disgusting. If you have rats, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to shame you out like that, but I called exterminator out, and the guy, he said I found one big rat, and it was like this big. It was thick. He said, man, you don't have any rats in here, man. That's the one. That's the only one you had. And my dogs chased it and killed it. But this kept going on. It kept going on for the time until I left. But one night after that big old giant rat was killed, I was sitting in my chair, and I was kind of dozing off. It was getting late and had to work the next day, and this scream came from inside the walls. It was like a woman's scream. It was, it kind of shook me up. My dogs both looked, and they looked in the corner of the room, and they were looking at the wall, and you could tell that they were spooked out because, like I said, my dogs aren't scared of nothing. Like, they're really not. And that scream happened, and I got up and I was like, man, that's not right. Something's not right. We went to bed, and like I said, the scampering kept happening. And then one day I had walked into I had a cooler in the kitchen that I hadn't really opened, and we'd have cookouts at that house and hang out, and it had a little dust film on it because I for just whatever reason, and there was 3-pronged footprints on that. It looked like a bird footprints, and I didn't really do much. I ended up leaving right after that. But, to deal with someone who knows things that, may or may not have, I don't know if it went back on them or I don't know. But it's to your credit and speaking on those things, it's not something to play around about because it's spooky. It really is. Like, nothing ever happened to me. My dogs, like I said, there were certain time at night they'd go right in their crates. I didn't have to crate them or anything. So that told me something was going on in that house. Now, I don't know if it was, like it was something before in that house because it was a real old house. But, when it comes to those things and to the new magic or, wizards and, things of that nature, it ain't something to play about, And I was all over the place with that story because it's hard to explain, the occurrences without being too vivid because you talk like I said, you talk about things like this, they're gonna pop their head back around, and I kind of got past that point in my life where it went away. Some of that shadow things went away. I think it was just, could be my childhood. I've mentioned on past podcasts, it could be anything. It could be the Ouija board I messed with in high school. It really could be anything. And, with talking about these things, like I said, they do rear their head back up.
The other thing, to me, all these beings, I always say, there's bad and good, Some tribes, they I don't want to say worship, that fire, but just like Muskogee Creeks, we have a lot of respect for the fire. We always consider ours as a live fire, but the other nations, they had old stories about fire. They would use that fire as a tool to help them see things. And they would talk to it, and again they would mention it like a person, and it would give them visions or give them power to do certain things. And it was man that made it evil. And so, there's many tribes out there that have stories about fire, being good. So, I just wanted to mention that, I know somebody's going to really say, dang, that guy, he always just dogs everything. But, what about us? You didn't say nothing about anything good, guy, And I apologize if something I left out or I forgot or what. But I do know both things can be good and evil. And I myself, I forget what they call those people that like to play with fire.
Pyros.
Oh,
Pyro, yeah.
Pyromaniacs.
Yeah. So
What is that? They put gasoline in their mouth? I don't know what they be doing, man. God.
I think of that. I'm kind of like that too, because I'm one of those guys that like to start that big old fire. They don't ever ask me to start that fire, because dang, I had that big old fire about 12 feet tall. Boy. You can ask everybody at home; they'll tell you that dang, that don't have him burn trash, boy. Throwing couches, and I could try to make that fire, but to me, that fire is soothing.
Mm-hmm.
I watch it, but I also can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like it's talking sometimes. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to encourage you guys, next time you're at a bonfire or what, sit there and look at it
Mm-hmm.
and see what it says to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not saying all of them are bad, but, I am saying there are entities out there that could cause, stuff like that, and so, I'm not blaming the fire in general or, these good fires. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there's one out there that does do that, eats people. And so, again, that's all I wanted to say about that.
Doesn't the tribe still have those recordings?
I would like to think they do.
I want to think one of them's on YouTube. I think I've seen one on YouTube.
But there's a bunch more, though, from what I understand. I
Yeah.
think you was telling me, actually.
Yeah, they had a whole bunch
And
of
then
them.
they mysteriously disappeared.
Yes, I don't know.
'Cause didn't he have a Bigfoot story, too? And
Hmm. They also had a lot of different entities out there that you don't hear of. One I used to like to hear was they considered it like a big old dog. It was like a big old dog creature. Now, when I say big, I'm talking about 9 foot tall type dog. But he walked on his hind legs. And if he ever caught you in the woods, he would tie you to a tree. And he would whip you to death with his ears. And they said, he wasn't really that bad. He was just keeping, there's certain places that you shouldn't be. And if he caught you there, that would be your demise. They said that was a painful death, because it was basically you getting whipped to death. And Creeks, they always got stories like that, just wicked ways to kill you.
Yeah, I know. It's like 1,000 Ways to Die.
I know it. Creek's book on 1,000 ways how to punish you to death. No.
I know, there's fire dogs, in Creek, Muskogee, or fire hounds or fire dogs. And aren't they supposed to have, loppy ears like that, like a basset hound?
Yeah, that's
the same thing?
It's the same
okay.
thing.
Okay.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, they're like fire. Yeah, okay.
And like I said, they would punish you to death. I mean, they basically whip you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've seen things. I don't really talk too much on air about stuff at the ground, but it is real. You know what I mean? Like the fire, and you just, I don't know. I don't really like to talk too much about it on air, but it's just something you have to experience. You know what I mean? So, anyway.
No, they'll. God.
No.
Dang, you give me that stink eye. That
Come
Fumby
on,
eye.
tell us.
Spill the beans,
no,
Tyler.
I'm just kidding.
Nah. The stuff the grounds I usually just keep there, and a lot of people. I mean, I know y'all respect that, and but I just kind of rubs me the wrong way when people just want you to talk about it, and I don't know. It's just something I don't talk about. It's just again, it's an experience, and people always like, how do you get to do that? Because not everybody gets to do ceremony. Not everybody gets to do that. We're special that we get to do that. But all my Indian friends, that didn't grow up in the culture, they always ask me like, how do you get to do that? And I'm like, just go, just show up. You know what I mean? And just do it. That's kind of how I did. You just start going. You know what I mean? You just find those grounds that you like, and or a lot of times though it's and go dance or whatever. But a lot of times it's from your maternal side that tells you which grounds that you belong to. But anyway, I don't want to talk too much on that. We're kind of getting off topic, but anyway, yeah.
Well, it's good information though, and that's one thing that my people, we just tell it. We've had storytellings for a lot of years. Up at call it the Hill, our tribal town headquarters. We just it's not being disrespectful, but it's just that's one thing that how I have so much knowledge, or I'm not saying I have so much knowledge, but I know things because of that.
Yeah.
Being a little kid, just soaking it up, sitting there in a lawn chair, 12 o'clock at night. We'd go till forever. Be out there telling stories, and to me, and that's one thing as a young buck. I appreciate a lot of the elders who are not with us. I've talked about my grandpa. I've talked about Louis Jackson. He worked at Sequoia. He was an athletic director over at Sequoia for a lot of years. Who I grew up around, and hearing these stories. I think it's important. And I we may get pushback on that. And that's fine. But at the end of the day, as a young buck, I appreciate those elders. Because one day I'm going to be one of those people. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to have the knowledge and to share to the young bucks then that are going to be then.
Because you're going to be that old crusty buck.
God, no, I hear crusty. No.
Dang.
Can't shame me out like
that. He's going to have that lopsided rack.
God, looking crazy.
Yeah.
But, like I said, it's just something that, it's very strong on my heart, especially going to these live events. And, I look out in the crowd and it's elders and young people. Like, not even young people, it's kids.
Yeah.
And maybe, one of those kids could be, not saying me one day, but, being like me and sitting in that lawn chair, seeing someone that's older than you, especially an elder in your tribe or your clan or just in your tribal town, just in your immediate area, telling these stories, and then you go, sit back one day and you hear that, like we're talking about today about, I haven't thought about that in years, the combustion, but to me, I said, I may get pushback on that, but that's just, what I believe, just in my heart,
You'll be our elder from now on. That's all mystery.
I know.
Elder.
He's our honorary elder.
He's our crusty elder.
God. Nah.
I'm going to give you that Indian name.
Man.
Fumby. No.
Real Muskogee one. No.
That real
doing me
Muskogee
crazy
name.
right now, man. Gosh, shaming me out.
Yeah.
Nah.
Chito Fumby.
Dang.
Put that crazy
Hey,
stank.
man, I'm still the new guy, huh? I'm still getting the new guy rad. So.
No, but I like what we do, and we're very respectful. I mean, we're just speaking truths and what we see and what we hear, and I don't know. I mean, we're not disrespecting anything or anybody. Like, talk about fire. Like, I've always respected fire. You know, even though I didn't know any better, I always knew it could destroy, and I knew it could give us like heat or like heat our food up or something. You know, like to protect us from like getting sick from eating like raw meat or whatever. You know, it cooked for us or something. But you know, I always knew like the dangers of it too. Like playing around with it. You know, like I was told like, oh, don't pop your fireworks in dead grass. You know, you can start a fire. Sure enough, you know, fires would be started and because of a firework or a cigarette even. And so, you know, I was always like aware of stuff, I guess, but I just didn't know like how I was looking at it, I guess. But I always knew like there was harm in it and there was good in it. So, you know, I've always respected fire, and it's really cool to hear what we talked about today about stuff I didn't even know. It's just information that is new to me, and you know, stuff I haven't even thought about in years. So,
thank you, Chris Hill. No.
Well, I'm always learning too. You know, that's one thing. You know, I always tell people. You know, I don't know much, and you know, I'm always willing to learn, and that's why I always go and ask. You know, and that's what I want to encourage all the youth out there. You know, to go ask. You know, ask your elders, ask your mom, your dad. You know, aunt and uncles. You know, whomever. You know, they might have just little knowledge, but that's okay because it'll be up to you to keep that knowledge going, you know. And unfortunately, you know, things are going fast these days, and we're losing a lot of that stuff to this new age type stuff, and we need to kind of slow things down and kind of keep what we've got, you know, going, you know. And that's why I was saying I'm so proud of these guys for doing this, you know, taking time. And you know, I know you're always going to have haters out there, but you know, Creator's going to bless each and every one of you for, you know, doing this, you know, keeping these stories alive, for teaching these type of things to the ones that may not have no one.
True.
Yeah.
Very true. Yeah. Like when I was younger, I say this a lot, but I was always afraid to ask like questions or anything. But I never thought of it like that. You know, we could be just somebody's information that maybe might be afraid to ask or just has no one to ask. So that's a really good point you bring up. And then I was wanting to swing around back to you, sir, playing with Ouija boards.
God.
Make sure you call him elder though.
God. Don't it? God. I don't even know what to say to that, man. Don't even. I know, man. I'm getting shamed out and go home, man. God. But man, I just experienced a lot of stuff. I've just done a lot of. I mean, it's really dumb. I'll say that. I've just done a lot of dumb stuff, man, and learned the hard way. You know, guess I'm old in my years now.
What made me think of that movie Ouija? I finally watched it, by the way.
Oh, did you like it?
It was good.
I liked it.
Yeah,
I liked it.
we watched it. I think a couple of weeks after we did that episode, but I was like, oh, it's on HBO Max, so ended up watching it.
But I know you want to hear this. I know you want to hear the story. Want me to tell the story?
The Ouija board?
I have two stories.
Yeah, this guy played with it.
Man, so I was a senior in high school, and I think this is what the jumping off point of letting these things into my life. I mean, more into my life. I'll say I've dealt with my entire life. So I was a senior in high school, and I had a buddy of mine. You know, he had told a story, and basically his mom had made a wooden Ouija board, it's like encrypted and all that stuff. I guess she was into that stuff growing up. Well, he had played with it and he tried to burn it, and when he burned it, he threw it in a trash pile and burned it, and it came back under his bed. So I'm like, you know, just kind of like, I know, like as you said, I know a few things, and so I was like, let's, you know, I don't know about all that. So y'all remember Hastings?
Mm-hmm.
Man, rest in peace. You're not forgotten, Hastings.
29-cent movie rentals.
Man, never forgotten. God, they'd be
R.I.P..
giving you credit too, man. You bring it back the next day. I was living on that.
Pour a
Anyway.
little Mountain Dew out for it.
Right here.
But they were going out of business.
That Keystone.
By the way, it's Sam's Cola.
Aw.
Sorry, man. I ain't gonna let them do you like that. But Hastings was going out of business, and they had a 56. You know, like do like that weird 63% off. You know, if you come on this day. And so we go in there and we're just kind of milling around and maybe thinking about buying a movie or something, and my buddy goes, "Hey, look at this!" And there's a Ouija board, and it was one of those ones that it's a Hasbro or whatever. And I was like, "Man, I ain't got no money. I got $20, and it was like $40-something, but it was like $100-something, without the discount." And he goes, "You know what, man? Let's go ahead and use because we were on the basketball team and we had to sell candy, or for Booster Club we had to sell candy bars. Then he used all the candy bar money to buy it. I said, "Dang, it's like the school will come after you." But so we ended up buying this Ouija board, and we go out, and this is like I said, I was young and dumb. But we had bought the Ouija board, and we had took it to the National Cemetery over in Fort Gibson.
You play with a Ouija board in a cemetery?
Man, that's what I'm saying. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. So we went out there, and we went to the gazebo, to the part that wasn't really built up. Because you have all the cemetery here, and then on back is a gazebo that they're going to put people in. So I wasn't, I wasn't really thinking much about it. Being mine, too, shout out to the guy who let us in. Actually, the caretaker let us in. That was crazy. I couldn't even believe he let us do that. But so we go out there and start messing with it. I played with it for literally, I put my hand on it for like 5 seconds. And it moved, and I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm good. So I stood off in the back, and I'm sitting there watching, some people that I was with started moving. They started asking questions. It was like, "Hey, when did you die? When this?" And they started answering. He started answering the questions, and one person, like my brother was with us, and we're kind of like, "Oh no, we're done." But one kid had his hand left on it, and it was moving, and he literally you could see light between. He was just barely touching it, and it was moving. And he said, "When am I?" I think he asked him when I'm going to die, and it started spelling it out, and he took his hand off. I'm like, "Dude, I was freaked out." So we ended up going to another cemetery, and there was a. This is crazy too. Like I said, I'm 17 years old. We go out to another cemetery, and there's a well that is like discontinued. Like it's an old well out kind of side, not in the cemetery, but off to the side. And we throw this Ouija board into the well, and we put boards, and we stacked it with stones. We did a lot of. We stacked it like there's no way this Ouija board's coming back. It's gone forever. About a week later, the guy who bought it woke up and that Ouija board was under his bed. And I didn't believe him. I really did not believe him. And he showed it. He took a picture of it and showed us. Because I wasn't going nowhere near it. But it was there. With that being said, you play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And so the guy that bought it had a lot of he's not dead, but a lot of issues. There's been a lot of things happen. I think that's another thing. The reason why I had such after my senior year, and I told that story at Hominy that you guys will have to go and listen to because I'm not going to retell. It's a long story, but basically that's kind of the reason I think why that happened. And I had to go see somebody, and not see somebody, but I had to figure out what was going on. But that's why I want to tell these stories. I'm not really one to share those two stories that especially the 3 stories I've told that I've never told anybody, is because I want you guys to realize, especially the young crowd, the youth, the kids, when you mess with these things, they're going to affect you. You're going to be messed with. Now, it's all about if you do the right things and get your life right, and like I say, live in that good way. But at the end of the day, I paid for my paid for my actions, multiple times over. And, I always think that, Creator every day, I always in my mind just kind of, thank you, give me another day, because it couldn't be like that, But that's my Ouija board story, and that's, it has affected a lot, in my life.
I always like hearing those kind of stories about, people dealing with these Ouija boards, if you know your history, that Ouija board in itself, the theory of it is super old. Now, every nationality had a form of a Ouija board. They didn't call it Ouija board way back then, but I think it was Parker Brothers made it Ouija. But, everybody had a way to communicate with the dead. With that being said, today you got updated versions. That Ouija board's outdated now. They're using those ghost box machines and ghost box apps. And they say that theory is still the same. You need to open it and you close it. And when you close it, you always ask that nothing follows you back. Mm-hmm. And, I always tell people to, once you're done with it, take it off your phone. Or, if you're going to use one of those machines, put it up somewhere, because if you keep talking to the dead, I always say it's going to make you sick, and this is from the crazy guy. No, that goes out every weekend.
I know. Falling asleep on desks with ghosts in the room,
doing all kind of stuff. But and I've had some serious experiences with these equipment, and I've had a lot of issues. And so like Mr. Tiger was saying, that these are real. These are real issues, real things, because when things start going bad, you're going to be looking for help, mm-hmm. and sometimes help won't be there. So, I want to say that much, but, that's all around the world, that talking to the dead. I don't care if you go to Japan, they had a way, India, you name it. They all had a way to communicate with the dead. And, they all worked. Mm-hmm. So,
mm-hmm. We got a surprise, guys. I got one.
I'm just kidding. Dang, that's why he wanted me to tell a story now.
I'm play it right now.
I'm out.
Man, he even got the candles going if you can't see.
I know, he's got the salt.
God. Start putting it on the window. That's what the
buffalo sauce.
Got it. Yeah. I know, man. I was listening to that story. I can't take my eyes off that freezer bag of sauce.
Bag of goodies.
Yeah. He's got all the sauces over here, man. He's got Chick-fil-A sauce, buffalo sauce, McDonald's syrup.
McDonald's syrup. McDonald's salt.
Those little crusty packages, man.
So he's gonna feed those spirits good.
Yeah, he's gonna give them diabetes.
Take some syrup. It's McDonald's syrup.
Get those
all kind of chemicals in it.
Yeah, those blind spirits, that one-eyed spirit.
Take this one. Oh my gosh. All right, well, we'll go ahead and cut it here. You guys want to plug up where to find you guys at?
Hey, are we going to promote? We got an event coming up in Porham.
Oh, yeah, let me bring that up.
When is that? The 8th?
October 8th.
Yeah, October 8th. It's the cure
Porham.
for. Yeah,
are you doing one? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Are you going to do another one at the Dome this year?
Yeah, I'll be down there. I don't know when that date is though.
Okmulgee?
Yeah.
October 22nd.
Yeah, that's that Saturday.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's go ahead and so we're doing a spooky season tour, 2022. September 3rd, Pawnee, Oklahoma has already passed. October 8th will be in Porham, Oklahoma for the Cure for Cancer powwow. October 15th will be in Bigsby, Oklahoma. October 20th, Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Tulsa Public Library. October 21st, Eufaula, Oklahoma. October 22nd, Okmulgee, Oklahoma. And then October 28th, Ponca Nation.
It's
So make
all-
sure you write that down.
It's all available on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram too as well, I believe.
Yeah.
Come buy a T-shirt.
Yeah, go follow us on Instagram, Facebook, our YouTube channel, and we'll be announcing these dates as they go on. So
Yeah.
we try to release every other week on Fridays, but yeah, might have some shirts. I don't know. Let us know if you would buy one. I had a really good, about 12 people said they'd order one.
Like that Twilight Zone.
I'd like to do 30 though. Like if 30 people could say, yeah, like for real, I'll buy one, then I'll for sure like send me the money and then we'll get the shirts made and have them ready. So
Yeah, that'd be sick.
yeah, I'd like to do 30 of this first design and then see how that goes and then go on from there. Tyler.
Oh,
No.
wait on me. I'll buy
Tyler.
one.
Plug up your stuff.
I thought you wanted me to buy a shirt.
I'll buy all of them.
I'll buy a shirt, man. I'll give
I'll
you
buy
the
all
money.
30.
I thought you told him to plug up his stuff. I said, God.
Plug yourself up.
Nah, you can catch me on Skoden_cinema on Instagram and Pump Action Podcast as well.
Golly.
I'm out, man. I gotta get out of here.
Plug yourself up. That's the term now. Go ahead and plug it up.
Here, Chris is cracking him.
Yeah.
I'll go. He's dying laughing over here.
People's gonna steal that now.
What, plug?
Yeah, plug it up.
Plug it up.
The shirts. That's what the shirts say.
Plug
Plug it up.
You can find me, Yahola Tiger, on Facebook. Reservation_mysteries on TikTok is our TikTok name. I'm trying not to be distracted by this. Go follow, like I said, Russell said, follow us on YouTube. Also gonna, dude, Chris
Get out the paddles.
Chris is having a seizure. My goodness. Someone please plug it up.
Oh my god. I'm crying.
And then go follow my Uncle John Tiger Artworks. Go shoot him a message. He might have something for you. Chris.
You still with us?
Christopher Honka Hill on Facebook.
Instagram, Facebook.
Facebook, Instagram. He's even got a TikTok. He always posts his content for his travels. There you go, Chris. I just plugged it up for you.
Chris got plugged up too.
Steady plugged.
But yeah, everybody go follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Check us out everywhere: Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Google us, and you would find us. And go check out our shows. All the info is going to be on our Facebook page and Instagram pages. And so, stay spooky, everybody. Don't forget to smudge.
Productofthe90s.